The roar of 20 heavy engines usually signaled trouble to the residents of the small, dusty town of Oakhaven, but to the men of the Iron Brotherhood, it was the sound of freedom, and the only family they had ever known. They were giants in leather and denim, their arms mapped with ink and their faces weathered by thousands of miles of open road, appearing to the world as a wall of impenetrable grit. But as the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the gravel parking lot of a roadside diner, the rhythmic thunder of their idling bikes was pierced by a sound that made every one of those hardened men freeze in their tracks. It wasn't the screech of tires or the crack of thunder, but the high-pitched, soul-shattering wail of a child who had reached the absolute end of her rope. From the darkness of a nearby alleyway, a small girl no older than 6 or 7 came sprinting toward them, her tiny sneakers slapping against the pavement and her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She didn't see the intimidating patches on their vests or the scars on their knuckles. She only saw a group of men who looked strong enough to stop the world from ending. She collapsed against the chrome fender of the lead biker's Harley, her small hands trembling as she clutched at his leather chaps, her voice breaking into a jagged sob as she screamed the words that would change the course of their night. "Please, they're beating my mama. You have to make them stop." If you believe that kindness still exists in the world and that everyone deserves a second chance at hope, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of humanity, and subscribe to our channel to join a community built on compassion. The leader of the Iron Brotherhood was a man known only as Bear, a name earned through both his massive physical stature and his fiercely protective nature. He looked down at the little girl, whose name they would later learn was Lily, and felt a cold stone of fury drop into the pit of his stomach. Her dress was torn, her hair was a tangled mess of blonde curls and dirt, and the sheer desperation in her eyes was enough to bring a man to his knees. Without a single word, Bear looked at his brothers, men like Jax, a former soldier, and Silas, who had spent half his life looking for a purpose, and a silent understanding passed between them. They weren't just a club anymore, they were a shield. Bear gently lifted the girl, setting her on the seat of his bike to keep her safe, and asked her where they were. Lily pointed toward a dilapidated trailer park tucked behind a screen of dying pine trees just a few hundred yards away. The air seemed to grow thick and heavy as the bikers kicked their stands up in unison. They didn't ride with their usual swagger, they rode with a grim, focused precision. The sound of their engines was no longer a roar of rebellion, but a low, vibrating growl of impending justice, a mechanical heartbeat that pulsed with the collective anger of men who had seen too much pain in their lives to let it happen to another innocent soul. As they pulled into the narrow, pothole-ridden entrance of the trailer park, the flickering streetlights revealed a scene of utter neglect. They followed Lily's frantic pointing toward a rusted, single-wide trailer at the very end of the row, where the sounds of shattering glass and muffled shouting were already bleeding through the thin walls. Bear dismounted before his bike had even come to a full stop, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel with a sound like grinding teeth. The rest of the Brotherhood fanned out, forming a silent, intimidating perimeter around the dwelling. The door to the trailer was hanging off one hinge, and as Bear stepped onto the metal porch, he saw a woman, Sarah, cowering in the corner of a tiny, dim kitchen. Above her stood 2 men, their faces flushed with malice and chemical rage, one of them holding a heavy belt while the other laughed at her pleas. They were the shadows that haunt the dreams of the vulnerable, the kind of men who believe power is found in the bruises of others. When Bear stepped into the doorway, his massive frame blotting out what little light remained, the laughter died instantly. The air in the room didn't just chill, it froze. The confrontation wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. There is a specific kind of silence that follows a man like Bear, a silence that carries the weight of 1,000 storms. The 2 men inside the trailer tried to muster a show of bravado, shouting threats and demanding to know who these bikers thought they were, but their voices cracked when they looked past Bear and saw 19 more shadows standing in the yard, their eyes glowing like wolves in the dark. Bear didn't throw a punch, he simply walked forward, his presence filling the cramped space until there was nowhere left for the cowards to hide. He spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper but carried the force of a landslide, telling them that their time in Oakhaven was over, and that if they ever breathed the same air as Sarah or Lily again, the earth itself wouldn't be deep enough to hide them. Panic replaced the malice in the men's eyes, and they scrambled out the back door, fleeing into the woods like rats leaving a sinking ship. But the story didn't end with the departure of the villains. In many ways, the true story was only just beginning in the wreckage of that kitchen. Jax and Silas stepped inside, their tough exteriors softening as they saw Sarah trembling on the floor. They didn't see a victim. They saw a mother who had tried her best to shield her daughter from a storm she couldn't control. With the gentleness of nurses, these men who were usually associated with bar brawls and loud music began to clean the glass from the floor. Silas found a clean towel and some ice for Sarah's bruised cheek, while Bear went back outside to fetch Lily. When the little girl saw her mother sitting safely at the table, she flew across the room, burying her face in Sarah's lap and sobbing with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The bikers stood in the shadows of the small home, feeling a strange, unfamiliar tug at their hearts. They realized that while they spent their lives riding away from things, this was the first time they felt like they had finally arrived somewhere they were truly needed. They stayed through the night, not as guards, but as a newfound family sitting on the porch and keeping watch while Sarah and Lily finally fell into a deep, safe sleep for the first time in years. Over the next few weeks, the town of Oakhaven witnessed a transformation that defied every stereotype. The Iron Brotherhood didn't just leave after the immediate danger was gone. They became a fixture at the trailer park, but not in a way that caused fear. Neighbors watched in awe as the bikers traded their leather vests for tool belts on the weekends. They replaced the broken door with a solid oak one, fixed the leaking roof, and even painted the exterior of the trailer a soft, hopeful blue. They built a swing set for Lily in the small patch of grass out front, the sounds of their laughter mixing with the rhythmic creak of the chains. Bear took it upon himself to ensure Sarah found a job at the local library, using his negotiation skills to make sure the manager gave her a fair shot. The bikers weren't just protecting a woman, they were rebuilding a life. They taught Lily how to ride a bicycle, with Bear running alongside her, his massive hands ready to catch her if she wobbled, proving that the strongest arms are those that choose to hold rather than hit. However, the deepest change happened within the men themselves. Silas, who had struggled with a sense of aimlessness since leaving the military, found a reason to wake up in the morning. He became a mentor to the local kids, showing them that being a man wasn't about dominance, but about responsibility. Jax, whose own childhood had been marred by similar shadows, found a way to heal his own past by ensuring Lily's future remained bright. The townspeople began to see the Brotherhood not as a gang, but as a guardian force. They started bringing coffee and sandwiches to the men while they worked on Sarah's home, breaking down the walls of prejudice that had existed for decades. The story of the little girl who ran to the bikers spread through the county, becoming a local legend, a testament to the idea that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear grease-stained denim and ride loud machines. As the months passed, Sarah and Lily were no longer the broken people who lived at the end of the road. They were part of something larger. On Lily's 8th birthday, the entire Brotherhood showed up, their bikes polished until they shone like mirrors. They didn't bring expensive toys, they brought a sense of belonging. They gave her a small, custom-made leather jacket with a patch on the back that read Little Sister, signaling to the world that she would never have to run for help again, because help would always be standing right behind her. As Sarah watched her daughter laugh, surrounded by 20 of the most unlikely guardian angels a person could ask for, she realized that the night she thought would be her end was actually the moment her real life began. The bikers had taught her that while there is great darkness in the world, there is also a light that can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the loudest engines carry the quietest, most compassionate souls. The legacy of that night remained etched into the heart of Oakhaven. The Iron Brotherhood continued to ride, but their mission had shifted. They established a foundation to help families in crisis, turning their brotherhood into a beacon of hope for others who felt trapped in the shadows. They proved that, no matter how far you have strayed or how rough your exterior may be, there is always room for a second act. Life is a series of roads, some paved and some broken, but as Bear often said, when he looked at the thriving gardens Sarah had planted in front of her home, it's not the destination that defines you, it's who you stop to help along the way. The image of Lily running toward them that night remained a vivid memory for every member of the club, a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than that fear. If this story moved you and reminded you that there is still goodness in the hearts of strangers, please leave a like and share this video to spread a message of hope. Please comment hope below if you believe that everyone deserves a guardian angel. Looking back on that day, it wasn't just Sarah and Lily who were saved. It was 20 men who had been lost in their own lives until a little girl's cry gave them a direction. The road ahead was still long, and there would always be new storms on the horizon, but as the Iron Brotherhood rode out of Oak Haven at the end of that summer, their engines didn't sound like a warning anymore. They sounded like a promise that no one would have to face the darkness alone, and that as long as there were people willing to listen to the cries of the vulnerable, the world would always have a chance to heal. They disappeared into the sunset, leaving behind a stronger town, a safer family, and a story that would be told for generations. The story of how a group of outlaws became the greatest heroes a little girl could ever imagine.